lunchtime? Why not try something smart to chew on? The Lunchroom on RCI, Monday to Friday, 12:45 to 2 p.m. The Lunchroom, informative, enlightening, provocative, engaging. The Lunchroom on RCI, food for thought. The station that gives you, more lunch.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Lunchroom on Radio Caribbean International for Tuesday, August the 26th, 2025. And it is program number 1435 of the Lunchroom. I'm your host, Calix George Jr. Now, in addition to 101.1 FM radio, you can also get us at our website, rcistlucia.com. And we are also streaming live on our Facebook page. And you just have to search for the official page of Radio Caribbean International. Please be sure to like and share that as well with your friends and family. And of course, if you want to call in to tell us what's on your plate today, the numbers to do so, 452-3046. That's our main line number here. And in addition to that one, you can reach us via WhatsApp. That number is 724-0008. You can call in or you can also send in your messages to 724-0008. Now, I want to send out some birthday greetings today. First, Miss Solange Edwards. Happy birthday to you, Solange, and we're hoping that you're having a fantastic birthday celebration. Also to Miss Kine Rodriguez. Happy birthday to you, and we're wishing you a wonderful birthday as well. I'll look back in time in a bit of history for today. In the year 1682 on this day, the English astronomer Edmund Halley first observed the comet named after him, Halley's Comet. In the year 1873, the first free kindergarten in the United States was started by Suzanne Blow in Carondelet, a suburb of St. Louis, Missouri. In the year 1937, General Franco's nationalist troops conquer Santander during the Spanish Civil War. 1959, on this day, the British Motor Corporation introduced the Morris Mini Miner, and that was designed by Alec Issingonis, and it was only 10 feet long and sat 4 passengers, perhaps one of the smallest vehicles ever built. And in the year 1996, on this day, U.S. President Bill Clinton signed welfare reform into law, representing a major shift in welfare policy. We now head across to our dish of the day.
Fue un moun, ja un moun. Ek lè l'histoire a sou traitement moun sa la fini, sa se lè pou lot chapit la. Sa vle di la kay un moun. Mais trop fois, moun ki ja fini jouen traitement à l'hôpital la, ka weste de SPA. Mis inédita, kome jou, kome simen, ek jist di situasyon di, kome mwa moun sa la ka SPA. Pa piski yo vle weste, me piski pieson, pa ka vini amase yo. Nou kopwan la via se manye koto wa bawase, e ba ou ni a chay bagay ka fet. Mais tous les lot jou moun sa la SP. Ça vle di a lot moun ki peut-être a peine, peut-être a dans situation critical, pas sa jouen a couche à l'hôpital la ki yo brise tout bonnement. Aussi, le yo kuyo ou, ek do fòm yo prepare, souple, prepare kou aussi. Amase fòm yo ale. Mene yo viwe a place confortable yo epi fòm yo. Kote soulagement yo kay kontine. Davwe, pwe ka moun, pa ka do bout le moun sa la kite l'hôpital la, I ka kontine epi ou. Sa se yo komisyon hot Ministeri Sati exafe kwa moun.
Serving now, the Daily Dish.
And welcome back to our program for today. And I think we're going to take a little bit of inspiration for our daily dish from one of the items in the history of today about the Morris Mini, the Morris Minor, and very, very tiny vehicle that was brought forward at the end of the 1950s. And it is interesting, in fact, because we have seen since the end of World War II, a lot of significant changes came around the world. We saw the rise, in particular, of the motor car becoming more central to individual lives, how we moved about, where it determined where we lived as a result of the fact that the vehicle became more prevalent. And there was a time, for example, that the average town was really limited by what an individual could actually walk from the center of that town to the edge of that town. And roughly about 10 minutes was usually what was considered a typical reasonable walk for most persons. So a human being walks on average about 400 meters in 5 minutes. So roughly the extent of a town from one end to the next, if you think of it in a circular sense, the radius of the town was really only about 800 meters in very, very many instances. And everybody really wanted to concentrate their existence in a very tight space. And so that tended to cause for very limited expanse, limited use of land for urbanization, and of course very dense communities. People tended to want to go up. And we look at an area like Castries, for example, the downtown, the original little grid of Castries, which stretched from the chaussee west to Manuel Street and the Prince Alfred Basin, was very, very contained, not more than about 80 or so acres when you look at it. And that's very typical of pre-car developments, very, very limited in their scale. But since then, and in fact, it was a time when I should mention that Castries, the little town of Castries, was very, very populated. Nearly 10,000 people would have been within a very small, very narrow area of Castries, and a few suburbs just along the fringes of that town, like Leslie Land and Marsha, for example. But of course, it has changed considerably. And it is typical of what we saw in that post-World War II era, where vehicles began to be much more prevalent. And of course, as a result of that, we saw people deciding to go further and further and further out. A trip to Grosley, perhaps in the 1950s and 1960s, was definitely a trip into the countryside. It was viewed that way. It was seen and is thought of as a rural district, and certainly what we now have existing today, where people traverse between Castries and Grosley, sometimes more than a good number of times in a day. That 10 kilometer or so more or less commute is done, used to be done pretty quickly, but of course, because so many more people are doing it, and the growth in the north of the island has meant that, of course, we are dealing with a severe amount of congestion on that Castries-Grosley Highway, now renamed in one section John Compton Highway, as well as the Julian R. Hunt Highway. And that link is basically seeing close to 30,000 vehicles on a daily basis. In fact, certainly by far the busiest road artery that exists in St. Lucia. And in fact, you will sometimes find yourself maybe even on a Sunday. In fact, there was some, just this past Sunday, for example, there was some line work being done by one of the utility companies in the Bois d'Ouage region. And even on a Sunday, you began to realize the volume of traffic that is existing on a Sunday. There's lots and lots of movement, and that is sometimes even just local to Gros Islet, not even people coming from Castries or outside of Castries going on. It's just that the volume of traffic on that corridor is tremendous. And so certainly the automobile has driven a lot of changes in terms of how we live and also how we build. And so as a result of that, of course, suburbanization, everybody wants their own car. It now means that you need space to park those vehicles. And that tends to take up quite a bit of space in and of itself. You look at maybe the average American house, maybe back in the 1950s, being built in that period in the suburbs, getting a carport, getting a garage was a big deal, right? To have the family car. And then probably by the 1970s, that one carport or one garage was insufficient. You now needed a 2-car garage. And now we look into the current era, and many typical American homes are being built with 3-car garages, almost as a minimum requirement now, and some even with more. So the vehicle is driving that demand. And of course, we also see it in the matter of parking requirements that are coming forward, or have been very typical of requirements for development since the 1960s and 70s. And we're seeing more and more this drive towards more parking. And again, the United States, because it is perhaps the most auto-dependent country that we can find, at least in our part of the world, you see it in terms of the large parking areas that exist. And many American cities, in fact, have been scarred. The downtowns are largely now taken up by a lot of these gaping holes, which are effectively just parking lots for people to be able to move around. And parking is taking up quite a substantial amount of space overall. And even the matter of the size of vehicles has also changed over time. So just as the average house size has increased in terms of people's expectations as to what they want in a house, no longer are you thinking about a house that just simply had maybe 2 bedrooms and a living room, a kitchen, everything all in one almost, right? That time has changed. We're seeing larger and larger homes, and of course, we spoke about the garages getting bigger as well, and you're also seeing the matter of the vehicles that have to go into those garages getting bigger and bigger as well. So the very, very different approach when it comes to the U.S. and where they have been at in terms of scale, and that idea of bigger vehicles always being better has tended to be what the focus has been in the United States. And so when you saw in terms of European development and in terms of their automotive industry, there was actually a greater emphasis on compact, on building more or smaller, more restrained size vehicles for their roads. And if that had to do as well with the fact that Europe was tended to be an older society, a lot more existing urban spaces. The roads were therefore much narrower, the lane widths were narrower, and so it tended to be going towards that direction for some time. So the out of that, of course, you saw the birth of these tiny vehicles like the Mini Morris and many others, of course, that would have been manufactured in the European continent. And it is still a matter that is important for us here in small island developing states, because the reality is we don't have our own fuel sources. We've got to be importing fuel. We've also got the reality of fairly difficult terrain to deal with as well. And of course, the matter of narrow roads, that is something that I think is quite ubiquitous to St. Lucia, and certainly an appreciation of that you don't have to go very far to have. And so the whole issue of maybe even the scale and the size of vehicles that exist that we should be trying to utilize is certainly a major issue. We are, of course, seeing a tremendous number of vehicles excuse me, coming into the country on an annual basis. More than likely somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 vehicles a year. And of course, some of that is replacement of fleet that is, people have older vehicles that are going out of use as well. But at the same time, we are finding ourselves in a very difficult situation because, of course, these vehicles are coming on island and many of them are effectively being buried on island. They are finding their end of life, end of useful life on the island, and then the big question is what happens to them. And unfortunately, in many instances, they are clogging up our already narrow thoroughfares, and we see, of course, a very high prevalence of roadside garages where people decide that the public road somehow becomes the parking lot for their garage and auto mechanic operations. And so that is a tremendous pressure that the country is dealing with, really, when it comes to the matter of vehicles coming into the state. And so, of course, within that context, can we really be able to continue in that vein? And to what extent more we can actually see that occurring. Because we are still seeing urbanization occurring. We are still seeing a demand for housing, albeit there's a big question mark as to whether, in fact, our population is plateauing. And like many other countries in the Caribbean and in the world, that seems to be a reality. Excuse me. In fact, I did notice quite a very interesting graphic recently looking at the world. And effectively, it was just showing countries that had already peaked. And by that, I mean countries where the population is no longer increasing. It has effectively either flatlined and is in some instances even declining. And in other instances, you have countries that will peak. And so they had about three different categories: countries that had already peaked, countries that will peak by the year 2054, so roughly in about 30 years' time, 29 years' time, and countries that will peak beyond 2054. That was the base year that they were using. And it was very interesting to see the circumstance there, because pretty much all of Europe, nearly all of Europe had already peaked. And certainly the likes of Italy and Germany and Spain, Portugal, Russia, most of Eastern Europe had already peaked. France and the UK and Sweden, I think, were the only ones where they were still seeing that the population had not yet peaked. But the driver in those instances was really immigration to those countries, people coming from the outside heading in, and not really the natural growth of the population. The same for Canada and the United States. They are being driven by immigration. Now, in the case of the United States, it'll be very interesting to see what's going to be happening, because immigration has been the driver of growth, population growth in the United States of America. And with growth, with population growth, you get economic growth. More people are being born, more people getting into the economy, more work being done. It's a natural correlation that tends to exist. Once you have population growth, you will also expect to see economic growth. And so, of course, that is one of the challenges that countries like Japan are facing right now, because Japan has peaked. It's already in a decline. And so even though the average Japanese, right now, I think the life expectancy at birth for the average Japanese is like 83 years. So they're living very long lives. But that said, they're not replacing themselves fast enough at this time. And so it is a difficult situation for a country where you get yourself in that circumstance, and you are in fact seeing your population falling. It has impacts on your growth rate, and Japan has been in this sort of stagnation for at least 2 decades or so now. And it is, of course, a major challenge on your social services, as you have an aging population, more demand on your health care, more demand on pensions, and other forms of care. So it really is a major challenge when countries find themselves in that trajectory. China is just about getting there too, right, in that respect. Of course, the places where you are seeing still some very healthy growth, Southeast Asia, as well as the Middle East and Africa, where there is significant population growth. But many countries in Latin America and the Caribbean have also peaked, or almost peaking, or are pretty close in that place. And I suspect in our situation, the sobering data coming out of the 2022 census is that we may very well be not too far away off from peaking, possibly within the decade. And that, of course, is a very difficult circumstance for a small island developing state that already faces tremendous pressure when it comes to emigration, people leaving the country, heading out. And we may very well find ourselves in a situation very similar to what Dominica has been in for perhaps the past 30 or 35 years, where in fact, their population has not been able to grow because of the extent of emigration impacting that country. So certainly within that context too, we definitely have to be thinking of the steps to be able to at the very least stabilize one's population, but certainly to get it into a path where it is actually seeing some meaningful growth. And of course, in the case of Barbados, they have also been taking that matter on significantly. A number of actions being looked at by the Barbados government to be able to change that around. And one of the areas, of course, that they're trying to maximize is that of emigration, encouraging persons to come in, right? Or immigration, sorry, encouraging persons to come in. And of course, they are looking at providing opportunities for Barbadians in the diaspora, not just second generation, but even third generation and fourth generation persons who are descendants of Barbadians, to be able to gain Barbadian citizenship. And of course, perhaps even right here in St. Lucia, we will see a fair number of persons with Barbadian heritage, especially in the south of the island, for example. We've seen that. Would there be people taking that up as an opportunity? It'd be very interesting to see. And of course, they're also looking to see how they can relax on the length of time one has to be a resident in Barbados to be able to actually gain citizenship. So I think from what I recall of the recommendations coming out soon, that one would be could become a citizen of Barbados within 2 years if one is resident there by, and those are of course for CARICOM nationals in that instance. So very well may have to see that some of those measures may have to be introduced right here in St. Lucia if we are in fact going to be able to continue running a country that is stable and prosperous, and that can of course support things like pensions and social safety nets. So a major discussion, no doubt, has to occur in that regard. And of course, perhaps also a mindset change. We, of course, have been somewhat over the years, I mean, not necessarily, although we quite often boast that we're very welcoming people here in St. Lucia, we can also be a bit insular at times. And so I think that too will also be a major issue. Will we be willing to accept differences? Will we be willing to be more tolerant of individuals? That, of course, is a major factor as the country may very well have to become more cosmopolitan, more diverse, more multilingual, possibly as well. In this entire situation. We heard from the Prime Minister of Dominica quite recently that he's willing to welcome Palestinians to Dominica as a place to relocate. And that's an interesting situation because as we look at the current unfortunate situation in Gaza, where you have, I think the estimate is nearly 2/3 of every home, every household in Gaza has been destroyed. Every home has been destroyed. 2/3 of every house. I think somewhere in the region of 300,000 homes destroyed in Gaza. A tremendous loss of property, a very highly densely developed area, roughly about the size of Barbados. And when you think about significant population there and the extent of rubble, the extent of destruction that has been brought upon Gaza by the Netanyahu regime and the IDF, and then you witness that when they're actually polling the population now, I think close to 43% have said that if they can relocate to another country, they will. And so it is unfortunate because, of course, people are clearly just not, they just don't want to have to continue to be living in this state of warfare, this state of squalor, of decimation, and they simply want to be able to survive, and that's very understandable for an average human being, and so it's unfortunate, of course, but quite often when you have these situations of war, you do end up with persons going all over the world as a result of the impacts of war. And of course, recently we saw Syria, for example, and you had Syria, another wave of Syrian emigration to many parts of the world, including right here in St. Lucia as well, because you've got small communities here as well. So it is something that has to be part of an overall thought of process as to how we can in fact become a more resilient country, because as of now, I think the last figure I saw was a fertility rate somewhere in the region of 1.4. And of course, we all know that replacement is required to be Above that, you need to be about 2.1 to be able to get to that point of replacement. So we're not in that very good trajectory right now, population-wise. That's our dish of the day. When we come back, we'll take in our weather report.
This has been The Daily Dish.
Tout couche à l'hôpital nous qu'a dire l'histoire. L'histoire de maman un moun, frère un moun, ja un moun. Et l'histoire à ce traitement moun ça la fini, ça c'est les pour l'autre chapitre là. Boom. Ça veut dire la caille un moun. Mais toutefois, moun qui ja fini joindre traitement à l'hôpital là, ka reste de SPA. Mise inédita, comme jour, comme semaine, existe situation di, comme moi moun sa la ka SPA. Pas puisque yo vle SPA, mais puisque personne pas ka vini amase yo. Nous comprendre la vie à sa manière koto wa bawase. Et ba ou ni a chay bagay ka fait. Mais tous les l'autres jours moun sa la SP. Ça veut dire un l'autre moun qui peut-être a peine, peut-être a dans situation criticale. Pas sa joindre a couche à l'hôpital là qui yo brise tout bonnement. Aussi, les yo kuyo ou ek do famille préparer. Souple, préparer corps aussi. Amasse famille aller. Mene yo viwe a place confortable yo et puis famille yo. Côté soulagement yo kay continue. D'avouer, pour ka moun, pas ka do bout les moun sa la quitter l'hôpital là. Il ka continue et puis ou. Ça c'est yo commission au ministère de santé exafé kwa moun.
It's now time for the weather report brought to you by Island Style.
Girl, I've been so stressed searching for the perfect tiles to complete my home. Really? Yeah, it's always the same white, beige, and gray tiles with these tile stores. Like they're all buying from the same place. You're the design expert. Help me, please. I'm fed up.
What are you looking for?
Something different. Something that says Caribbean beauty and suits my personality. Something vibrant and classy with a little razzle dazzle.
Okay, Ms. Razzle Dazzle, I know just the place. Island Style Tile and Bath, they're my #1 store for everything tile. And with their new In Living Color collection, you'll find the most gorgeous styles to give you that splash of Caribbean flair you're looking for.
That sounds perfect.
I'll even take you myself and throw in a free design consultation.
I'll never say no to that, sis. I can't afford you anyway.
Visit our Island Style showrooms in Castries, Rodney Bay, and View Fort, or call 450-452 or 453 Tile. We'll help bring your vision to life in living color.
This is Radio Caribbean International. It's now time for the weather news.
And the forecast for St. Lucia Valley for the next 24 hours. Winds will be blowing from between east and east-southeast near 18 miles per hour or 30 kilometers per hour. Weather fair to partly cloudy skies with a few light to moderate showers. Forecast for the Lesser Antilles. Fair to partly cloudy skies with a few widely scattered showers. Tropical weather outlook. Light to moderate easterly winds and fair to partly cloudy conditions with a few showers are expected across the eastern Caribbean during the next 24 hours. A tropical wave will approach the region late Wednesday, but is not expected to bring any significant weather as it moves westward near 17 miles per hour or 28 kilometers per hour. A second tropical wave located over the eastern tropical Atlantic is moving westward near 17 miles per hour or 28 kilometers per hour. Tropical cyclone formation is not expected during the next 7 days. And that is your weather report brought to you by Island Style.
This has been RCI's Weather News. For more information, call the Weather Hotline at 454-3452. RCI 101 number 1.
Girl, I've been so stressed searching for the perfect tiles to complete my home.
Really?
Yeah, it's always the same white, beige, and gray tiles with these tile stores. Like they're all buying from the same place. You're the design expert. Help me, please. I'm fed up.
What are you looking for?
Something different. Something that says Caribbean beauty and suits my personality. Something vibrant and classy with a little razzle dazzle.
Okay, Ms. Razzle Dazzle, I know just the place. Island Style Tile and Bath, they're my #1 store for everything tile. And with their new In Living Color collection, you'll find the most gorgeous tiles to give you that splash of Caribbean flair you're looking for.
That sounds perfect.
I'll even take you myself and throw in a free design consultation.
I'll never say no to that, sis. I can't afford you anyway.
Visit our Island Style showrooms in Castries, Rodney Bay, and View Fort, or call 450-452 or 453 Tile. We'll help bring your vision to life in living color.
And welcome back to the lunchroom here at Radio Caribbean International. Now, of course, the number to call in to tell us what's on your plate today, it is 452-3046. Again, 452-3046. And as well, our WhatsApp number 724-0008. Just a couple of things to note coming out of announcements from the government of St. Lucia. One being the matter of the reestablishment of a grant, a creative economy grant for young creatives and entrepreneurs. That was announced yesterday by the Prime Minister. And the offer there is for funding of grants between up to $5,000 and $10,000 for creatives in a wide range of various areas, whether it might be film, dance, music, design. It's pretty broad. And whether it would be for training, I think it goes up to $5,000. And for productions and equipment, up to $10,000. Those are grants on offer, according to the Prime Minister. And this wave of it, I think $350,000 has been the amount allocated to do that. And of course, I imagine it to be a competitive undertaking. So in most of these instances, those programs tend to be oversubscribed, and so I would have to expect that there would be some level of competition in doing so. And I think individuals have until the end of October to put in proposals in that regard. Of course, we've seen similar grants. I think the first time this program was actually undertaken was actually done by the National Development Corporation. I can't remember the exact year. I think somewhere around maybe 1999, 2000 or so, where they introduced a grant for artists and musicians, as the case may be. And then we also saw around 2011 to 2016 creative industry grants being offered as well. So again, another opportunity here, especially for young people who consider themselves to be creative, and of course, wonderful opportunity to get some free assistance in that regard. Another announcement was on the matter, just quite recently, on the matter of support for nursing students. And of course, the South Louis Community College is kicking off its new academic year very shortly. And the government did announce support for nursing students in the most recent budget for 2025-2026. And a St. Lucia Times story covering that government to roll out subsidies for nursing students. Just to quickly share that short story with you. In a direct response to a chronic national nursing shortage, the government will roll out a new subsidy program for nursing students at the South Louis Community College starting in the upcoming academic year. The initiative, administered through the Department of Education, is designed to ease the financial strain on families and encourage more young people to enter and remain in the critical profession. With tuition for the 4-year program reaching as high as EC $40,000, Education Minister Sean Edwards said the subsidies are expected to make a meaningful difference for both students and the wider health sector. Under the new system, students will receive subsidies at every stage of their training, beginning with EC $2,500 in both the first and second years, increasing to EC $5,000 in the third year, and culminating with EC $10,000 in the final year, an amount that covers the full cost of tuition. Edward noted that the measure not only ensures students can complete their studies, but also guarantees a pipeline of graduates entering St. Lucia's healthcare system. Quote, "We recognize the burden nursing students and their parents carry, and we also recognize the urgency of producing more nurses," he said. This program speaks to both. And that story, as I mentioned, coming from Karim Nelson of the St. Lucia Times. And certainly a win-win situation, because we certainly do need more nurses. We're speaking about opening up St. Jude Hospital soon, and that, of course, means more beds. I suspect, of course, the requirement for more staffing is going to also come with the new St. Jude Hospital. But let's take in a call at this time. Good afternoon. Welcome to the lunchroom. What's on your plate today? Hello. Hi, caller. How are you doing?
Are you hearing me?
Yes, but you're breaking up a little bit still. But try. Go ahead.
Yeah. We did see that they talked to JP about these American warship in our water, and he said he's waiting for the CARICOM because of the Treaty of Chaguaramas. But why Camilla Bissett, or how they call it, the Prime Minister of Trinidad, can go on her own and said I didn't consult CARICOM? What's going on there? Is there they heading for a break or what?
Well, I don't know that there will be a break from CARICOM necessarily by Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, her stance is an interesting one, that she's so brazen about making the point that she had no issue of consulting with CARICOM. I'm not even too sure exactly what was the purpose of her making that statement. If in fact the United States was not entering Trinidad and Tobago waters, and they had not been granted permission to do so, I'm not sure why she went to the extent that she went in that statement coming out of her, because you could have simply said, well, we have not in any receipt of any request from the U.S. authorities, and we are monitoring the situation very carefully, and we've been given one explanation, and we're still going to wait for approaching that. One would have thought that would have been
Venezuela, as if everything is fine with Venezuela, and when you send so much warship by submarine, I think under the water, for a few what you call drug baron. Is that the truth? You come in for drug baron, or you come in to invade Venezuela? When you have aircraft carrier, you know how many planes that those big aircraft carrier carry?
I didn't realize that they were sending an aircraft carrier. Yes, caller, I'm here. I wasn't aware of the aircraft carrier. I did see in the list.
I think I have to stop. The line is bad.
Okay, sure. Not a problem. Thanks very much for your contribution. I did actually give a list of the vessels that we seem to have been aware of that were coming, man. I don't know that there was an aircraft carrier within that list, but there was mention of 3 destroyers with which had missiles. Basically, these were missile vessels that could launch missiles effectively, right? So, and yes, it would seem a little strange that that would be required in an operation to deal with the cartels, drug cartels, as was being put forward. As I mentioned, the tendency is that this is actually dealt with by the U.S. Coast Guard. In fact, just yesterday, I think the U.S. Coast Guard had a historic interception, or and just to read the story very quickly from USA Today, which comes from August. Well, let's just read the story. U.S. Coast Guard offloaded a historic quantity of cocaine with hundreds of millions on Monday, August the 25th, marking the largest amount of drugs ever offloaded by the agency. On August 25th, the Coast Guard announced in a news release that it captured 76,140 pounds of illicit narcotics valued at approximately $473 million. Guess where? In Port Everglades, a seaport in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The drugs included roughly 61,740 pounds of cocaine and 14,400 pounds of marijuana. To put this into perspective, the potential 23 million lethal doses of cocaine seized by the U.S. Coast Guard and our partners are enough to fatally overdose the entire population of the state of Florida, Rear Admiral Adam Shamey, commander of the Coast Guard Southern District, said in the release. And of course, I'd mentioned that the Coast Guard cutter Hamilton, one of 4 418-foot Legend class national security cutters, home ported in Charleston, South Carolina, brought the illegal drugs to port. I'm not sure that it mentioned specifically where they were intercepted. Okay, right, here we go. Where did the seizures occur? The seizures, which occurred between June 26th and August 18th, resulted from 19 interdictions in international waters in the eastern Pacific coast and the Caribbean Sea, the Coast Guard said. Coast Guard cutter Hamilton detained 34 suspected drug traffickers and stopped 11 go-fast vessels through the interdictions. Drug seizures deny criminal organizations over $500 million in revenue, according to the Coast Guard's release. Authorities released videos of the seizures showing what occurred during 2 separate interceptions. In one instance, officials stopped a go-fast vessel approximately 14 miles southwest of Haiti on Friday, August the 15th. The boat had been detected by a maritime patrol aircraft, and that interdiction resulted in the seizure of more than 1,615 pounds of marijuana. And just to wrap up that story, in another incident, Coast Guard cutter Hamilton intercepted 2 go-fast vessels suspected of drug smuggling southeast of the Galapagos Islands, Ecuador, on Thursday, June the 26th. In that instance, officials seized more than 4,475 pounds of cocaine. About 80% of drugs are interdicted on the high seas, according to the Coast Guard. So basically what they're saying is that most of their operations are actually in open water, in international water. And what you're also seeing is that it's not just in the Caribbean, in the Pacific as well. It's a major area of movement of transshipment. So as to why you would wonder then, specifically in the case of Venezuela, we also know that there are interests off the coast of, no doubt, of Ecuador, of Panama, of pretty much the entire Caribbean coast, including Colombia. So the interest of having significant military assets in Venezuela in particular is an interesting one. But hey, guess what? This is what the U.S. Military has decided, and we'll have to see how that, of course, will continue to pan out. But it certainly is a matter that we've got to monitor, because the reality is it can have implications for us here in the Caribbean, especially if people perceive that the Caribbean is not a safe place. The Caribbean is dependent on being an attractive destination for visitors. They want to be able to know that that is something that they can do without worrying about any warfare or anything of the sort. So we'll have to, of course, continue to monitor this situation, because we certainly would not want to see any kind of warfare in our backyard. Already, the situation in Venezuela is very tenuous. We've seen millions of Venezuelans seeking refuge outside of the country because of the economic crisis that has befallen the country, the embargoes that have been placed on them for quite some time. And of course, many have headed to the United States of America, but also a number heading to other neighboring countries, including that of Trinidad and Tobago. And it has been an issue there, and of long-standing relationships. Of course, you can stay in Trinidad and look across the Gulf of Paria. It's not far away at all. You can see the coastline of the mainland Venezuela. So it is certainly something we have to be monitoring in great interest. As to how long this may very well continue is going to be interesting. But clearly the intention seems to be ramping up the state of play with respect to Venezuela, and we're already hearing out of them. Of course, they see this as a sort of a form of aggression towards their sovereignty. Already, of course, they have been facing a tremendous amount of economic and financial exclusion by the United States and other actors in this regard. So we would like to believe that nothing significant or serious will come of it, but we'll have to wait and see how this all pans out. That's our program for today. And of course, when we come, we'll be back again tomorrow, God willing, for another program of the Lunchroom here at Radio Caribbean International. Of course, there's cricket on tonight with the St. Lucia Kings against the Guyana Amazon Warriors. And definitely the Kings want to pull off a victory here. And so we wish them the very, very best, starting at 7 o'clock at the Darren Sammy Cricket Ground. Take care.